So how, because for the Cloister Scholar, it says as a child you were inquisitive, when your playmates were possessive or raucous. In your formative years, you found your way to one of Faerun's greatest institutes of learning, where you were apprenticed and taught that knowledge is more valuable treasure than gold or gems. So, what do you imagine that like Ricky's childhood was like? Like, how did he grow up? What was um,
He was actually taken at birth.
He was
He was he
taking
was
it. Why? Yeah. Why don't you just tell me your background? I guess start. We'll start there.
um so in the village that he grew up in,
Hmm.
children once in a generation, children are taken to join the scholars of Arkun, and he was selected out of all the children in the village and taken essentially at birth.
Is it like a
Like
Hunger Games kind of selection where your like name is just called and
the people of the library claim that it's divine intervention, but they just pick a child and take them, and
um
it is considered a great honor in the village to be taken. But
uh
the child is to never know their parents.
so is this village that you were born in at least like all halfling?
Yes, it's a halfling village with a few like spitterings of random races amongst them.
Okay.
So yeah, he was taken and like, but never knew his parents. Never needed to know them. He had a mentor in the library who was a dwarf named File, and File taught him about his culture and brought him up as if he was his own. Taught him the language of the dwarves, like customs of the dwarves, and different bits and bobs. And yeah, he grew up in the library.
Of his home
But
or of another library, like a
it's in the
dwarven,
same village.
like a dwarven library. Oh, okay, in the same village.
It's in the same village. It's just there happened to be a dwarf there under the library. And yeah, he was taught to read from very young age, and he learned to love it there. Like it just seemed to come naturally.
So let me ask you, why did this particular group of halflings, uh, who have these scholars that choose children at birth to come and learn in the libraries, why are they so, um, because generally halflings are kind of not I guess xenophobic's not the right word. Like they welcome other races in if they happen to be nearby or stuff like that, but they're still kind of more of a musical, whimsical, go with the flow type of people, more or less. Why is your home of or your barrow or burrow of halflings so inquisitive? Why do they have a library that they're collecting these stories and tomes of knowledge?
It's been there for generations, so no one knows the true reason. But apparently these halflings descended from um, a, a group that was part of a great war many years ago. So they continued that knowledge and drew in knowledge from other groups. That's why they have a dwarf. They have a few different races under their cloister. But I, I don't have the exact reason, but they just, this library is just accruing knowledge. The villagers themselves don't necessarily mind. Like, it's a great honor to be selected, but they aren't necessarily entering the library themselves. It's more just for the chosen few.
Sure. I imagine like sometime hundreds of years ago there was a halfling, that was born in your village that went out and told great stories and collected great stories, and when he grew old, he came back home and
To share the knowledge
he
with the
wanted to
young ones.
record them all, and so he started writing all these books of his tales and adventures, and then other halflings started to do the same thing, and they would come back with more books of stories and knowledge and adventure, and it just kind of kept became a tradition of your particular group of halflings almost, where now every 10 years or however many years they select these new people to learn these histories and then eventually go out and get more and make more of their own to add to their library of history from a halfling's perspective almost, right?
Yes.
That sounds pretty legit. That's me just making shit up. 3 rosé apple ciders deep.
Yep. Sounds good.
And I'll have to refer to this recording later to remember. So you spent a lot of your youth with File learning Dwarven and also the histories of heroic or maybe not so heroic halflings before you, and
Yep.
when the extent of your learning in your uh, particular halfling village was done, um,
He was sent out to spread his knowledge and to acquire new knowledge throughout the land.
so one day you are sitting in the little library of your home village. Why don't you just like try and describe for me a little bit what that library looks like? What your halfling little library looks like that over the years all these halflings have been collecting knowledge for your clan.
There isn't a speck of dust, as if almost magically cleaned. The books are stacked high, so like 7 feet is
Nice.
as high as it goes. So very
They're
high for a
they're
halfling.
they're not on shelves or anything. They're just kind of stacked on top of each other.
They're in shelves, but the shelves are stacked up on top of shelves,
Sure. So like
and
there's like
it's
rolling
like a
rolling
typical library.
rolling ladders that kind of
Yep,
zoom
yep,
around the outskirts or whatever. Yeah, cool.
yep, exactly. And it's massive. Like you rarely see another person unless you're
Is it
planning on seeing another
is it
person.
underground or is it like did the halflings like build a library? Like did they build a big
They it's almost like well, it's not a spy. It's a large building on top of a hill.
nice. Do most of the other halflings in your town live like in hovels in the hills or in underground or do they have above ground dwellings as well?
They have hovels in the side of hills. Yeah,
Okay, cool. So
like
there's just
smaller
like this
hills, and then
big
the biggest hill
library
has the
kind of on
library
the
up on it.
hill overlooking all the little hovels and things.
Yes.
Cool. So one day you're in the library of Arcoon,
Yep.
and you're probably poring over maybe your favorite tome, one you've read 10, 20 times before. And you hear the heavy footsteps of File behind you coming. And as you turn to look at File, why don't you tell me a little bit about what File looks like as well?
Like typical dwarf build, like
Yeah.
short and stout. Grey beard, but no hair, completely bald, just the grey beard.
Nice.
He's got a very gnarled, old, aged face. Like he looks incredibly old, but
Nice.
he's always got a kind smile upon his face.
So File says, "Oh, Ricky, I see that you're looking at your favorite book again. You know, I know that you've been through every tomb in in the tower here more than once. Um, I think it's time for you to expand your horizons. Um, I think it's time for you to leave Arcoon and go not only find, but make new knowledge of your own."
But where should I go?
Well, that choice is only yours. I can tell you that one of the largest libraries in all the lands, far to the west, is called Candlekeep. You might think that Arcoon has an extensive library, but it pales in comparison to the tall towers of Candlekeep and the ancient tomes that contain all of these lands' histories. But I might provide another suggestion as well. You might know the town's been pretty excited as of late that Shield Meat is coming around once again. How old is Ricky?
21, quite young.
21. And so he's probably heard of Shield Meet before, but he's never been able to attend one. And you're being essentially asked to go out into the world now. Shield Meet is a festival of sorts that happens every 4 years. Um, uh, the capital cities have very large celebrations, and people throughout the realm travel to those cities um, to take part in Shield Meet, and it's a festival of community and um, uh, trade and negotiation and big deals essentially get made during Shield Meet, as well as a lot of intermingling between you know different parts of the world. And so Files essentially says, um, you have another option, though. Instead of burying your face in more books, you could learn to live a little, Ricky. Um,
I think
as you probably well know, um, Shield Meet is coming up very soon, not but more than 2 weeks hence, and I know the people of Arcoon are very excited about it. There's no way that you haven't heard of it yet, and um, if you travel up the long road to the city of Neverwinter, you might be able to make a little history of your own.
um, I think that sounds great. I would get to meet people from many different lands, and I could tell them my stories, and they could tell me theirs. That sounds wonderful.
He says, you should know, far to the south, um, there's a civil war going on. Um, Recently, there's been a large population of tieflings and as not Asmir, but Genasi that have been migrating up to the Northlands, um, all throughout the Sword Coast, but mostly in Neverwinter as well. They have built almost a small city of their own on the outskirts of Neverwinter, um, called New Kalimshan. Um, it will be exciting, but it'll also be quite dangerous. These people are refugees from a place of war, and they're desperate. Um, the roads might be dangerous, and the city itself, once you get there, might be dangerous as well. The city guard takes great care and pride in regulating um, Neverwinter during Shield Meet. There are surprisingly few negative altercations or outcomes, and it's usually a time of peace. But um, we should probably establish like where in the world your character's from. So essentially, halflings can spring up anywhere. Um, so
Yeah.
if you want to be from like very far away, I would say some of these parts of the world that I've never really, like maybe over here in the Dale Lands might be a pretty good place. Like, um,
That looks good. I don't really want anywhere snowy, and that's like nice and lush and green. So yeah, I'm happy
yeah,
with that.
and there's a ton of history in the Dale Lands as well. So like, it would make sense for a community of halflings to like have that kind of lifestyle because a lot of very eventful things have happened in this part of the world. Um, um, but it is a fairly long journey for a pair of little halfling legs. Um, so File says, you know, it is time for you to leave, and I can arrange transportation for you. So the choice is whether or not you want to sail the high seas or travel on land.
I would prefer the land route.
Well,
I feel I would see many more villages via land than via
yeah,
sea.
absolutely. By land will take much longer. Actually,
Would I get there in
I
time?
get yeah. I guess I have to like retcon a little bit, and you might have to leave a few months before Shield meet, and spend a few months on the road. Um,
Would you have to retcon if I go by sea?
Still probably, yeah.
Okay.
It's a long journey, but I mean that's okay. You know, it's not a big deal. We're just trying to establish your like character's place in the world. So like working
Yeah.
out these kinks is more like to give you a sense of yourself than more than anything else. You know, it's um,
Yeah. The character would much prefer via land though, just because more villages, more people.
yeah, no, that makes like a ton of sense. Like so, let's see here. We'll just judge a distance a little bit. So 15 feet 15 feet or so is essentially 500 miles. So, um, if you're coming from Cormanthor, we'll just put you like on straight lines. So, we're just trying to establish the time the journey takes here. Um, so, 5, 6, 750. 1250. 1450 miles, give or take, and you'll pass through Waterdeep, which is the city of Splendor, one of the other largest cities in the realm. Um, so we'll do a little quick math here. 1450 divided by 24. 2 months essentially of on foot travel. 60 days doing 24 miles a day. So give or take you stopping from interesting places and interesting people, triple that time,
Yeah.
30, 60, 60, 120, 180, 6 months or so, probably. Um, so we should create some like significant events that happen to you during that time, probably. Um,
Most likely, yeah.
yeah. So, um, um, being that you spent most of your life growing up in the libraries and probably not having a lot of street smarts,
Has very, very minimal experience, yes.
um, I think probably one of the first most major experiences that happens to you is File uh, purchases you passage on essentially like a trade route caravan. So there's probably like 6 or 8 caravan wagons in this large caravan that he buys you passage on, and it gets you a very far portion of the distance. Like it gets
Yeah.
you all the way down through Carmenthor, past these big kind of errant mountains and deserts, these dry lands, into the reaching woods, and and then they make their stop in uh, um, scornable. Essentially, they that caravan that you ride with through all that time. They make stops in along the way in various cities and settlements and trade and make trade
Yeah,
and continue down this path. Um, and most of that portion of the travel goes very well. Like it's very refreshing to meet all these new people and see all these new lands um, and then the caravan stops and then they break off and they start heading south essentially and now at this point you are left to your own devices to find your way up to the rest of the way up to Neverwinter. Um, so by the time you get to Scornable, uh, you didn't really have to spend much money traveling through here, from your home down to here, which is pretty significant distance still. I mean, it's like, at least 50% of the journey. You've traveled
yeah.
700 miles, um, 3 months essentially into that time. Um, why don't you give me, you're not proficient in performance, but you still have a fairly high charisma, right?
Correct.
So why don't you just give me um, just a flat charisma check? So
Yeah, this thing
the
is
sheer
nice.
this just the sheer culture shock of the journey of meeting all these new people. Like you've read about all these things,
Wait,
absolutely.
lucky, lucky. So it would be
Okay.
an 8 at least.
No, you if you're gonna use your lucky feature, then re-roll. Don't you won't we won't take the 8. You'll re-roll it.
All right.
Yeah. Nice. Okay, that's a bit.
I will say this: there is a feature where I can automatically turn on lucky, but it never tells you when it activates. Do you want me to do that or not?
What? Read the feature.
In the character sheet, you can activate lucky, so it just automatically re-rolls ones, but you never see it through roll 20. It never shows you it unless you like
Oh,
hover over the
I
number.
gotcha. So for yeah, if don't auto select it. Like
Yeah, that's what I
if you
thought.
want if you want to
I'd rather
choose
see when it
if you want
works.
to yeah if you want to choose to be lucky, then you can do so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd
Um.
just like to attempt to remember to re-roll.
Yeah. You won't you won't you won't just take the other number though. Like I'll have you re-roll the dice. It's essentially like a inspiration in your pocket. You know.
Yep.
Um. But along the way, your travels go pretty well. Um, through through these heavy portions of desert and stuff like that. It's actually pretty tense. Like there's a lot of orc and half orc tribes as well as like desert goblin tribes, and they're used to the traders and stuff that come through. And as long as they have something good to trade, it's still beneficial for those um, types of clans and societies to allow traders to pass. Um, Occasionally, from time to time, it does turn violent and caravans are killed and robbed, but that did not happen to your particular caravan. And actually, along the way, um, you guys stopped in a well, we're stopped by a nomadic half-orc tribe um, who kind of wanders these deserts up in here, and they had happened to make their way down into the river regions and marsh or oasis type lands down between these two mountains, and they stopped your caravan midway through, and you were able to essentially help the caravan leaders talk your way out of trouble with an interesting story. So, do you have one, or would you like to improvise one?
I will attempt to make one up.
Okay.
I will tell them the story of a great orc ancestor of theirs. who led their party to great victory of the invading invading hill giants that came down from the mountains. I assume this is like Northern Hemisphere esque place where the north is cold and the south is warm.
Yeah.
So yeah, frost hill giants that came down from the mountains and attempted to take their women, and this warlord led them to a great victory over the hill giants.
Um. So after you tell that story, um the tribes kind of, they're not necessarily enthralled by it, but it's interesting to them. Like none of them have seen a frost giant, but it's interesting to for them to hear a little history of their tribe. Most of their lives are kind of consumed by violence and survival of the fittest. And one of the half orcs, um, after you tell your story, um, slaps you on the shoulder. Your knees kind of buckle under the weight of his strength, and
I would fall over.
yeah, and he picks you up out of the sand, and he says, "Oh, it was a good history, little halfling. I'm glad that you passed through. Um, Here, take my flask. It never gets me drunk, anyways." And he like slaps a little silver flask on your chest, um, and kind of just wanders off. And what he gives you is a tankard of sobriety. This
Okay.
tankard has a stern face sculpted onto one side. You can drink ale, wine, or any other non-magical alcoholic beverage poured into it without being inebriated. The tankard has no effect on magical liquids or harmful substance such as poison. So essentially, like somebody could pour a bunch of hard liquor into your flask, and you could drink the whole thing and not get drunk.
Okay.
Yeah,
What was it called? Tankard of.
tankard of sobriety. Oh, so yeah, it's not a flask, but it's actually like a mug. It's like a mug that's carved out of bone. Actually, it's probably carved out of like a tusk of some kind. Um, so it's like stark white. It might even be carved out of like a giant, even like it might be carved out of like a giant thigh bone or something. But it's carved with like a face of a scowling orc on the front of it, and any ale or alcoholic liquid poured into the mug does not make you drunk when you drink it.
I,
Yeah.
I say I say thank you quite appreciatively to him as he walks off.
And then after that part of your journey, about halfway up to Neverwinter, um, you land in Scornable, near the Reaching Woods at a fork in this river, and the caravan that you were hired to travel on, you knew was only going to take you this far, and then break off to the south, um towards the Dragon Coast, and now you have to find a way essentially to mm, make your way up towards Neverwinter. Obviously, it's much easier to find some sort of caravan or something to become a part of again. How would you like to handle that situation? Scornable is um, mostly a human town. It's a settlement at the fork of this river. Um, the It's kind of framed in these dry lands with these sparse woods around it, and but the mountains nearby are um, it's not very well known. The people who are um, run Scornable keep it kind of quiet. They kind of make it seem like the town is a little desolate and doesn't have much wealth, but the mountains nearby are plentiful with mithril, and they keep that kind of on the down low.
Okay. Um. So what sort of? I guess there would be like a merchant somewhere in this village.
Yeah. There's there's still a lot of trade that happens down here, being that it's uh, kind of one of the major forks that breaks off into north, south, east, west, and it's at a breaking point in the river, and also is near the woods, so there's still stuff to hunt, kind of. So there are different kinds of merchants. Um, they do have actually. I mean, it's on the down low, but they have a pretty proficient dwarven smith who does forge things out of mithril. He doesn't have any mithril on display in his shop, but most of the stuff that he proclaims that he can make is made out of like copper or iron. Um, and then but otherwise it's mostly like a human settlement for the most part.
Yeah, I'm more like thinking like go to like a general sort of like goods merchant who potentially may know of a caravan that would be heading up to
Yeah, sure.
Neverwinter.
There is a general store. Uh, it's called River's End, and they have mining stuff, and um, they sell a lot of stuff that's pertaining to like survival in like kind of desert climates as well. Um,
I'd probably head into there then.
yeah, the proprietor of River's End is a man by the name of Ursu. He's kind of um, he's like middle aged. He's um, very weathered and tan. He has kind of slicked back black hair and a very thin mustache. Um, um, as you enter his shop, you can see very kind of like low shelves that have all different kinds of mining equipment and provisions, and the typical things that you would see in any kind of provisions shop for the most part. But they have a lot of stuff that's like they have larger water skins essentially than a normal provision shop would have. Like their water skins are twice the size of a normal water skin, stuff that would help you survive longer in like deserts and things like that. And
Okay.
Ursus says, "Hi, I haven't seen a halfling in a while. It's good to see you in the shop. What can I do for you, little one?"
Hello, good sir. I'm actually after some information. I'm trying to head up north to Neverwinter. Might you know of any trade routes heading that way?
He says, "Well, you know, obviously we're connected directly to the tradeway. Uh, it heads up towards Daggerford, Waterdeep, passes um, straight by. Um, well, I guess you had to cut off a little south for Boulder's Gate and Candlekeep, but um, one of the largest trade roads in the realm connects right here to Scornable. Um, there's tradesmen coming in and out at all times of day and night."
Um, how would I go about potentially joining one of those caravans? As I need to head to Shield Me. I hear that's coming up in a few months.
He says, well, cavern leaders tend to vary from person to person, so you'd have to talk to one of them. As uh, most of them uh, hire a heavy guard, so if you're capable of fighting, then you'd be more than welcome than any caravan heading north. Um, but then again, more of the larger caravans, they have a lot of guardsmen, and they like to have people that can entertain them and during the evenings, so as to keep a lighthearted spirit about the travel and the journey. Um, I guess it all depends on the skill set that you have to offer and how much money you have to pay.
Um, just out of character. how valuable is gold in this world?
So
Like, what is considered a
think of a gold piece as like $100 in our
it's okay. It's just not great
I mean
because like I have some gold, but probably not enough to like pay for getting me there. Correct?
how much gold do you have?
10 from the background.
You would probably have to pay your gold and provide some sort of assistance or uh, um, have a skill as well, you know, whether it be fighting
Yeah.
or entertaining.
Um. So yeah, I'm going to say I'm not the strongest at combat, as you can probably tell by my size. Might you know of the leader of one of these larger caravans, so as I might offer my stories to them as entertainment?
He says, well, as a matter of fact, I know that one of the larger caravans heading out of the city tomorrow morning is led by a woman named Cordelia. Um, she's transporting several cartons of iron, as well as weapons and well-made armor, um, all the way up through Waterdeep to the city of Neverwinter. She'd be the only one I know of that'll get you all the way to where you're going, but she's a stern woman, and I wouldn't be one to ever call her kind. Um, but she'll get you where you need to go if you can convince her that you're worthy or capable and aren't going to hold her and her team back.
Thank you very much for this information. You've been most kind. Have a good day, sir.
I've gotten kind of drunk, so I'm just dropping into Western accent,
That's fine.
which I've learned is just that's just what happens when I get to past a certain amount of intoxication. I just all I have is Western after that.
I mean, we're in the West.
Yeah, you know, you're heading that way. uh, but the Ursu, the proprietor of this business you're in, um, says, you know, you're most welcome. And if you need anything before you need to leave, I'm sure that I can acquire it for you. But Cordelius, who you want to talk to get you all the way to Neverwinter.
Okay, and I assume she'd be in the local tavern. I
If
asked
she's
that.
if she's leaving in the morning, absolutely, yeah. He says she's either making final preparations or indeed she'll probably be at um uh the Skipping Stone, which is the more rambunctious um tavern that we have in town.
Okay. I take my leave. Would I be able to tell where the Skipping Stone is from my current location?
Yeah, so it's essentially it's like kitty corner to the provisioner's shop. It's like right across the way. One of the largest buildings in this small trade town. Um, you know, you can tell that up the lane essentially this is essentially almost like an old western town. Like it has a crossroads, and then lining the crossroads are buildings that kind of sprawl out, and it's almost like a T section. Um,
Yeah.
and like dead center of town is the provisioners, across the road is the skipping stone, and then you can tell if you look up the way that's uh, any caravan that's going to leave anytime soon is kind of lined up along the roads, um, up towards like the north, and
Okay.
you can see like another large caravan poised at the front gates of the town. Um, that's pretty heavily unattended. You know, there's a few people milling about, but it's pretty clear that like though that caravan's probably not going to leave tonight. Probably going to leave in the morning because most of the people that would be a part of it are nowhere to be found, and there's just a few guards kind of hanging out, making sure nobody fumbles with their materials that they're going to be transporting. Yeah.
Yeah, it's mainly just the guards there at the moment, not
hmm
the higher
hmm
ups.
hmm
I head straight towards the tavern.
Um, as you step into the skipping stone, it's kind of set at the it's kind of set at the edge of town along the river. So like um, it's a big two-story building, and as you're walking up to it, it's assembled from um, some dark wood from the reaching wood, and uh, there's since it's always kind of arid and fairly warm around here, the whole lower first level of the structure is kind of open air. So all the window, all around it is, there are kind of beams that hold up the upper portion, the second level, but otherwise, like it's all open, so you can see the whole interior of the place. And as you're walking up towards it, you can hear laughter and cursing and music coming out from the open windows that kind of envelop the whole 360 degrees of the structure. You can even see, like now, as you're getting closer, you stand up on your tiptoes essentially and look over the edge, and you can see straight through. Where there's a portion of the interior of the building that's like the bar, that kind of wraps around the inside, and there are shelves where all the um, small kegs from varying places come in of different wines and ales, and then beyond that you can actually see like the stables behind the building and stuff like that. And um, there's kind of like a swinging double door that is in the front of the skipping stone, and when you come in, it's pretty clear there is one massive Goliath woman that is commandeering most of the attention of uh, of the establishment as you enter, and she's like essentially finishing like a punchline of a joke, and the whole tavern just like breaks out in laughter, and it's probably you can tell by the way that mostly men in here, and how they're laughing is probably a pretty dirty joke. Um, and then a couple um, people come over and give her a few big mugs of ale, and try to sit down at the table, and she seems pretty drunk right now, and um, she has a few of her uh, close, like her friends from the caravan here, but like anyone else from the outside, even though she seems to be fairly charismatic when she's drunk, at least, she doesn't let anyone else sit down at the table. She kind of pushes them down or pushes them away. She tells them to fuck off.
Okay. Um, I guess I'm going to try and stealthily sit at the table.
Yeah, why don't you make a stealth check for me? And like to like so there's this in one of the corners essentially there's like a big kind of diamond shaped table, and wrapped around it's kind of a V booth sort of situation, and then across the front of it there are like stools that have been set, and there's probably like 12 or 15 people that are seated all around her, and she's right in the corner in the center of everyone, and um, I'll minus a little bit since she's intoxicated um, from her passive perception. Um, but I have to roll her wisdom first. She's pretty Why? Oh,
She's pretty on the ball.
she's pretty on the ball. Yeah, she's a caravan leader. So, um, you kind of duck under between a few of the uh, stools and go underneath the table, which is still a foot above your head almost, and you start to clamber up between her and someone else, um, and she kind of like swats her hand down, and she goes, "What the fuck is touching my leg?" And then she like grabs you by the collar, like she finds you as she swipes, and she grabs you by the collar and pulls you out from under the table and like holds you up over her head. And she looks up at you and she says, "Well, what do we got here? A little halfling come to play." And she like sets you down in the center of the table, in the middle of like these 15 people, and she says, "All right, little halfling, then what do you got? You came to feel me up like you're some sort of a Machiavellian. Well,
I did not come to fill you up. I came to destroy you in a drinking competition, miss.
everyone kind of goes silent at that. Um, even like the table around her, at least, like there's still people like having their own conversation, doing their own things. Actually, give me like a like how loud are you like projecting that? Like you're trying to make it like really like um
I'm very confident.
so just like of since you're not like proficient in performance, like charisma, just flat charisma check. Um, so it's very loud in here, and you proclaim that you didn't come to feel her up, but you came to destroy her in a drinking contest, and uh, um, she says, "What's that, little halfling? I couldn't quite hear ya. You sound like a mouse more than anything else. Why don't you speak up a little louder?"
I say it again. I came to crush you in a competition of drink.
Um, and so that everyone kind of like they start to realize like she's engaging you directly, which she hasn't been doing for most of the evening. She's been like getting drunk and telling stories and kind of doing her own thing. So people start to like quiet down a little bit. Why don't you make another charisma check with advantage? Nice, critical. So the whole place just falls silent. You can actually hear now that night's kind of coming in. There's like a soft golden glow, purples, golds of a sunset that everyone, around the interior of the bar can be seen all around because, there's no windows. It's just all open air on this first level of the Skipping Stone, and everyone kind of falls silent and you can hear the rushing of the river, and you can actually kind of hear, as the sun is setting, like crickets coming out. And
I pull out my mug and I just say, "Fill up me lucky mug. Let's do this."
and it like simultaneously, like every server in the bar has like materialized with essentially like a pitcher of dark ale, and the first one that gets there like pours into your mug and refills Cordelia's drink as well, and she just downs hers right away. Like she doesn't even say anything. Like there's no start, there's no begin. Like she just downs her first mug, slams it on the table, and like instantly someone just refills it.
I down my first mug.
So it's an interesting sensation. You can feel the liquid past your lips, but then it doesn't feel like anything like goes down your throat. It doesn't feel like anything fills your belly. Like there's nothing after that. Like you can feel the cold, foamy, dark liquid pass by, roll over your tongue, and then it's just kind of gone.
So I get taste. It just doesn't really feel like it goes anywhere.
Right, yeah, it just kind of, you get taste and then it just kind of disappears. And
after I down my first one, I say I require travel to Neverwinter. If I, when I win this, you'll give me you will take me there along with your caravan.
She says, "I like your spunk, little halfling, but nobody's ever bested me in a drinking competition. Whether you win or lose, I will take you no matter what for your sheer audacity. But if you do beat me, I will give you a separate prize." Um, and essentially, with your mug, you just dominate this massive woman in this drinking contest. And
Yeah,
but it goes on well into the night. Like she probably downs like 18 to 20 mugs of ale, and between I think probably like between the mugs from time to time, you start telling a story, she starts telling a story, and throughout the course of this whole interchange, people start to leave the establishment throughout the night, and eventually it's just you and her, and she's like, um, by this time, like you've introduced yourself to her, and she's like, um, I'll tell you what, Ricky, I've met some halflings in my time, and they've always been able to hold their drink, but I've never met anyone that can hold their liquor quite like you. And she says, I'll get you to Neverwinter, that's for certain. And she kind of like vomits on the tabletop of the bar, and just like flops over in her own vomit and passes out. Um, but in the morning, um, the innkeeper actually like gives you a free room for the night. Like she's been in here several times before. He's seen her compete in several drinking competitions before and never seen her lose. So you're like awarded a free room. You're awarded a nice breakfast, and Cordelia is not in the inn in the morning, and so you stumble out of, or you don't even stumble, you just wander out of the bar in the morning, and you see the caravan being prepared, and
I waltz on over.
yeah, she actually sits up in the front and actually steers the head caravan herself, and um, as you waltz up to the front wagon, and she turns and she gives you a wink. She's like very tall. She's like 7 feet tall. She has kind of like
She's life sized.
she has like a dark gray skin, and a long kind of brown braid uh, down the back of her hair, and or down the back of her head, and she dresses very simply though. She has plain um, she has like a kind of like a kilt, like a plain green kilt, and a brown kind of leather jerkin, and she's got some very sturdy looking traveling boots, and beside her, between in the center of the console, essentially of the first cart of the caravan, there's a big greatsword there as well, and as she sees you. As she's is kind of getting the reins going, she says, "Oh, I thought you wouldn't wake up in time, Ricky. Well, welcome aboard." And she like, "I saved you a seat," and she pats the seat right next to her at the front of the caravan. She says, "Well, I may have been drunk out of my mind last night, but I remembered that I promised you a new prize if you were to beat me, which nobody ever has. I'll have you know." And she hands you something as well. And when I can find my page, I will tell you what it is.
I assume, despite her drunkenness, I know she's reasonably intelligent individual. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
she says, I've never lost a drinking competition, but I've never lost a dice game as well. And she hands you a dice, and she says, "You seem like a gambling man to me. This might help you if you ever find yourself in trouble in a game of dice." And she hands you a little black dice with white dots on each of its six sides. And whenever you roll this six-sided die, you can control which number it rolls. It's called the charlatan's die.
Okay. I say thank you very much. I bought a gift for you as well. And I pull out from my bag one of the two tomes I get from my background, and I hand her the book from my bag, Great King Fred. I say, this is one of my favorite stories. I hope you enjoy it.
She looks a little surprised, like she wasn't expecting that. You can tell, as a shrewd businesswoman and the leader of a trade caravan, nobody's given her anything in a very long time. And she says, most of my time is spent drinking in bars and rolling my wagons on the road. I don't usually have time to stop and read, but I'll give this book a gander. And she like tucks it into her vest actually, and she picks up the reins of her oxen and gives them one loud crack, and the caravan begins to move up the tradeway towards the Sword Coast. They make a quick stop here at um, Dragonspear Castle and unload two full caravan carts of weapons and armor. Um, it seems like a human order of knights or paladins of some sort, and continue up the way, up the tradeway, past Daggerford, and land in Waterdeep, where you guys spend about uh, a week or so. The city of Splendor. Um, you've probably read a lot about Waterdeep, actually. Why don't you make a history check for me? Another
Hey, not too bad.
another crit. Yeah. So Waterdeep, the city of Splendor, first originated as essentially a warlord's stronghold. There was a warlord back in the olden days where dragons and giants were essentially combating for rule over this portion of the world, and um, a warlord created this stronghold and just kind of build up and out from there. And now it is called the City of Splendor. Um, High towers, sprawling city that is now ruled by what are called the Masked Lords of Waterdeep. And these Masked Lords meet in secret to discuss the fate of the realm. Uh, of course, they all know through their networks of spies who each individual lord is, but they all pretend nonetheless. And um, it is one of the more essentially it's ruled by nobles, noble families and people of noble birth with long lineage that hold sway over the city as a whole, and it's a very fancy place. But there is also through your history and through all the halflings that have been to Waterdeep in the past that you've read about, and just through your sheer um, attentiveness to the books that you read, you personally think there's something far more sinister going on. That there's something else entirely that is in control of the city of Waterdeep. There's too many coincidences for it to be for the city to find itself in its current state. And you probably believe that there is some other very powerful, mysterious
Entity.
entity that is actually controlling the city besides these masked lords.
Okay.
Um, you don't have a lot of time to investigate that while you're here, but um, it becomes pretty apparent very quickly that it can't be anything else but that, because the people here just seem too complacent almost, um, and entitled, and under somebody else's thumb. You know, it's
Okay.
very strange. Yeah,
It's not the best environment.
yeah. But after Cordelia makes her trades, you head up towards the city of Neverwinter, and you meet the South Gate. And as you approach, you pass through Little Calimshan, which is um, um, very close to what File, your Dwarven mentor, had mentioned. Um, a sprawling outer city beyond the walls of Neverwinter itself, of kind of filth and um, degenerate or shady characters, massive population of tieflings and genasi, who are
So these are essentially the refugees that File
refugees,
mentioned,
yes.
right?
And you pass through the main gates of the city with no problem, and you make your way up right into the um, essentially the noble district of the city, uh, sort of near the,
As we're making our
yeah,
way,
sort of
as we're
near
making our way
so,
through, I'm just going to ask Cordelia about how long, if she knows how long till what was it called again?
shield meat.
Yep, she'll be.
Yeah. She kind of extends her hand out and she says, "It's all but uh,
Okay.
yeah." And we she says, "We are just in time, little Ricky. Um, welcome to the city of Neverwinter. I know that you've traveled a great way. You guys probably spend a lot of time talking and telling each other about your,
Different stories and
lives, yeah,
such.
and stories and things like that. And you find yourself coming through the southern gate of the city of Neverwinter, into these like trade slash noble district of the city, and you can hear the crashing waters of the coast and the rambunctious sounds of all the ships coming in from around the realm in the docks district nearby, and it's quite a sight to see. Never in your life have you laid eyes upon so many different types of people and cultures all smashed together in one place.
I assume this is the biggest city I've seen so far along the journey, correct?
Um, Waterdeep is just as big, if not a little bigger, but it's quite different than Neverwinter at this point in time. Waterdeep during Shield Meet doesn't accept so many outsiders because of the nobility of the city's inherent nobility of the city. It's
It's a
like
bit too posh.
Shield Meet, yeah, Shield Meet for Waterdeep is kind of by invitation only. Um, whereas in Neverwinter, like it's one of the largest cities and one that accepts all of the realms.
Cool.
So most of the diplomacy happens here, and actually, the ruler of Neverwinter currently is called Lord Dagalt Neverember, who is actually one of the lords, masked lords of Waterdeep, they call him the Open Lord of Waterdeep because he has made his title and presence known through both cities, and he's trying to essentially become the new leader of Neverwinter because its old leaders have been somewhat overthrown recently. But for Shieldmeet, there is peace, and um, it is time for new
Yep.
negotiations to take place, and it is welcoming of all people and culture, and it is especially trying to show that now with the allowing all the refugees far to the south to come and take up inhabitants here on the outside of the city. So it's very chaotic, but also very merryful and joyful, and um, you make your way through the gates and part with Cordelia as she makes her trades and moves along up towards Luskin, and you find yourself in the um, trade districts of the city near the docks. And that is where we will end our prequel for Ricky for Curse of Strahd.
Sounds good.
So I hope that